so you want to count calories. I'll run you through all of the things that you need to know and be aware of. So we'll start with the kind of most important thing is accuracy. When you're counting calories, the only thing that really matters is how accurate you can be. And there are lots of different ways in which inaccuracies can creep in. So, first of all, legally, there aren't really repercussions for labels lying. So, there's no shock to you that businesses know that people want to eat less calories. It's obvious. So they'll take down their calories a bit, and they'll lie, especially foods that are marketed as like health food, low fat, stuff like this. They can lie, and there's not going to be a huge legal repercussion for them. So beware of that. Second of all, apps that track, like MyFitnessPal, all these things, they're going to be a little bit inaccurate. So for example, a friend of mine this morning just pointed out, fried egg says it's 70 calories. That's not true. An egg by itself, medium size, is about 75 calories or so. So you're telling me an egg plus a whole bunch of butter or oil, don't use oil, but if you are using oil, whatever, it's the same number, is 70, it's just 2 calories more? No, it's not. So things like this, they add up. It's not going to be just one thing here, one thing there, that's it. It's like consistently, it will add up. And if you figure it out over a whole week or more, it's going to be problematic. Next up, there's different food. So the example that I always go to is salmon. Take wild Atlantic salmon. That's about, I think it's 180 calories, approximately. Fine, But then you've got farmed salmon. Farmed salmon has got a way higher fat percentage. That's about 220 calories. And then going to the other end of the spectrum, you've got wild Pacific salmon, which is a lot less. I think I don't want to say 130, but it's somewhere there. So again, it's like if you have some salmon and you just put in salmon, well, you might be putting in the wrong type of salmon. Then you've got eating or not eating the fat in food, or the skin. So like with chicken, if you eat the skin, that's a lot of calories. With salmon, if you eat can you call it a skin? Is it scales? Who knows? If you eat that, a lot of calories. The example that I'll use though is beef. So for myself, I will cook sirloin or some type of medallion steak, whatever. And they'll be sometimes they'll be not on the medallion, but on the sirloin there'll be fat going along the edge. I don't eat that. So if I were to report the amount of calories in one piece of sirloin, well, it would be a lot higher than what I ate. So it goes both ways. You've got to be aware of this. Then there's eating homemade things. So for example, if you bake your own bread, like I do, when I eat bread, it's not often. What companies do with bread, for example, is they'll put in additives that make it more fluffy and lighter. So if you go and look up very, very basically one slice of white bread or one slice of wholemeal bread, you put that number in, well, it's going to be different because one slice weighs a different amount. But let's say you really do your due diligence and you look up how many calories per 100 grams this slice of bread is, and then do it for your own. Well, it's still going to be different. Let's say you used a bit of butter, which is good. Butter tastes amazing in bread. So you do this, and it's still going to be different. And I mean, let's say you put in some honey, like I like a little bit of honey in my bread. It's going to be different again. So beware that eating homemade food, it's going to be different. It's not always going to be higher, it's not always going to be lower, but it'll be different to what the sort of accepted value is for that kind of food. So that's another place to be careful of. And the last one is the size of a unit. So let's say I put in one egg into my calorie thing, which I have. Well, if I've taken a value for a small egg, but I'm consistently eating large eggs, or extra large eggs, or vice versa, it's going to be different. So minimize inaccuracies before you actually get to trying to think about more advanced ways to track and analyze your diet. Then there's prep. So if you fry something, it's going to be full of butter. If you put on condiments like sauces, or if you put on a lot of, but you'd have to put on a lot of herbs to actually get up calories there. So let's just stick to the sauces. Sauces, creams, things like this, there can be a lot of calories in there. If you have full fat mayonnaise, that's like, I think it's 700 calories for 100 grams. I don't eat mayonnaise, so I don't know, but it's going to be high. It's probably not. I digress. These things need to be counted, because while it is a science to track foods, there are going to be inaccuracies, and so you want to minimize the inaccuracies that you know you can take care of, because you're never going to be perfect. I'd say the best you could do realistically over a whole day is be accurate to within about 50 to 250 calories. If you're consistently eating the same thing, it really doesn't matter if you're a little bit inaccurate, because you're reporting the same thing as the same thing all the time. And so let's say you're constantly 100 calories over. Every single day you're 100 calories over because of one thing you eat. Well, it doesn't matter, because at the end of the day we're using this to figure out differences in diet. We're not trying to use this to figure out one specific point and that's that, because obviously metabolism adapts. So if you're off by the same amount every single day, doesn't matter. But obviously, if you're not eating the same things every day, you can't be off by a certain amount in one food, then a certain amount in another food, because you're going to be reporting the same number of calories for completely different numbers of calories, which is obviously not a good idea. So now that we've got the sort of I want to say the groundwork out of the way for what to do, for how to count, let's dig into. I was trying to zoom in on the Excel thing in the recording software. Let's figure out how to actually count calories and what we need to look for. So I'll explain how the spreadsheet works. It's extremely simple. We have the macro, we have the quantity, and then we have the total for that food. So let's say a food has got 50 calories per unit, right? And let's say we have 2 units. What we want to do is this is equal to that times this. Done. There we go. And then if we have that a whole bunch of times, goes down. The total of that is a simple sum. There we go, 500 calories. That is all of the maths that you need to know for how to operate a table. What I've done here is, if you've got, I should actually show you how to do this properly. Once you've got this, you want to go to Insert, Table, there you go, done. And now what happens is, let's say this is 45, this is 67, this is 11, this is 90, there we go. We've got this whole bunch of different stuff now. These are numbers, but you can sort it however you want. If I want to then go and sort the numbers out, well, it'll change, and it'll sort the rows out appropriately. It won't like move one thing up and then another thing down. So I should probably change the numbers here to show that works. There. So if we move this largest to smallest to largest, it inverts that as well. So it's not just shifting around, because I always had 2 all the way. So that's how you would program this out. Let's talk about what I've got in the chart and why. So I do it per either quantity or per gram. So if we look here, a banana is per banana. I make this, again here, it's like a small banana, it's probably going to be about 90 calories. A big banana is going to be about, I'd say closer to 200 actually. So I make sure that my bananas are all you know, approximately, I'd say this is, I've probably underreported my calories on the banana there for this one, but usually I'd get a little bit smaller. So again there, it's like, that's my own inaccuracy. So you got to be aware of these things. And then for other things like asparagus, I've got, and of course my apples are actually quite small, I get Royal Gala, which are, they're teeny little things. So that's why it's so low. If you were to get maybe a large Brabant or a large Pink Lady, that would be, 100 calories. For that, something like asparagus or beef, I've got it per gram. So if I put in, let's say I had 200 grams of minced beef at 5% fat. There we go. That gives me all of the values for that, and then it all gets summed up at the bottom. So that's how that operates. The macros that I've got and the reason I've got them: I've got calories for obvious reasons, I've got protein because you need that to build muscle, I've got fat because it kind of keeps a whole bunch of really basic bodily functions running, and I've got carbs because of the glycogen and because it helps run the nervous system. You need carbs, whether you like it or not. You can do keto. You can, but I would, in the context of bodybuilding, I would advise against keto. The way you can figure this out is by looking at who runs it, and then you'll kind of figure it out. If no one at the top is running it, it's probably not a good idea. If you're going to take it really, really seriously. Obviously, if you're just hobbyist, fine, whatever. I digress. So, these are important. Then you've got fiber, which is also extremely important if you don't want to have like a whole bunch of tummy problems. And then lastly, there's sugar. This one I've actually added a few days ago, so as I use a food, I fill in the amount of sugar there is. That's why it's not complete. So then I have calories, protein, fat, carbs, fiber, sugar. Now here on the right, we've got two little columns that are quite interesting. It's protein per calorie, and I've multiplied it by 100, so it's not 0.00 blah blah blah, and fiber per calorie. This is so that, let's say it's towards the end of my day, and I think, well, gee, I haven't hit my protein target yet. What I'll do is I'll sort this one, largest to smallest, and we'll see. The tinned tuna, or the chicken, or the beef. Those are some really good options for getting a lot of protein for very few calories. Same with the fiber. If I'm not hitting my fiber, what am I eating? Berries, spinach, broccoli, sauerkraut, asparagus. So it's a quick way to sort things out. I haven't done this for carbs because it's a bit obvious. It's a bit obvious for carbs what you got to eat. If you really just want to fill up on straight carbs, just eat sugar. Don't do that because it'll inflame your gut, but that is the sort of nuclear option. But I know there are fruit and vegetables, so I can't really go and stray too far away from what I need by going after them. But for protein, let's say I don't know which yogurt is the best, because if I told you, well, is Greek yogurt better than cottage cheese? Which one should I go for if I'm really in a pinch? I sort it like this. I look down the left, cottage cheese is under Greek yogurt, because they're both really, really good, but it's things like this you want to know. Same with the Activia. Like, let's say I want to go for Activia, but then I figure out, hey, look, it's actually way further down. It's probably not the best idea to eat that. To add on to this, of course, you'll notice things like asparagus and spinach at the top. I would err away from those, and what I might do in the future is modify the protein per calorie with the bioavailability of them. So for example, the protein that you get from plants isn't going to be as bioavailable to the body to metabolize and actually use and break down into amino acids than something from chicken or beef or an animal. And it's different from every single source, so something else to consider, but that's like really, really damn specific, and you won't need to on this sort of a scale. So that's why I've got that for the protein. Then at the bottom, what I've got here is that it says RDA, but that's really just for myself. what I've done here is I've taken the protein I've eaten in that day, the sum, and I've divided it by 159 and turned it into a percentage, which you can do here. Why have I done that? 1 pound of protein per body weight is all you need. That's like upper limit. If you're in a cut and you're getting ready for some contest prep, maybe 1.25. You know, of course everyone is different. So if you find, hey, I really do need this much protein, then yeah, you do. But those macros could be going to something a bit more useful, like carbohydrates. So it's not all about, oh, how can I get 500 billion trillion calories of protein a day and never eat anything else. Not a good idea. So that's why I do that. And so then I can see this tick up as I eat more things throughout the day, and I can kind of compare it to the rest. For fat's an interesting one, because there's kind of two schools on fat. There's the fat is amazing and it's great and we need loads of it, you know, the kind of the more keto-esque group, and then there's the other group which is like, well, fat's calories, and the less fat, the more protein you eat, the better, because it's, you know, 9 calories per gram in fat, and that's gonna really mess up your macros. Well, yes, there's an element of truth to both of them. For fat, you want to aim for 48, so that's for me. You want to aim for about 30% of body weight in pounds, in grams. I should have said that for the protein as well. It's in pounds of body weight turned into grams. So if you weigh 150 pounds, you will want to have 150 grams of protein and 50 grams of fat. Although that's not 0.3, that's like 0.33, so down a bit. That's where I get that 48 number from. I regularly exceed my fat daily allowance, and that's totally fine. This is really just like, the only one that I'm, the two that I'm dead set to is protein and fiber. The fat is just a kind of like, okay. And I notice if that goes up by, like, if I eat 200% the fat that I need, because there's no benefit to eating more than what you need for fat. Same for protein. There's no benefit to eating more than you actually need. The only macro in which there is no like minimum or maximum, if you will, is carbs. So any fat calories that I eat that are over what I definitely need, that could be going towards carbs to fuel my workouts, to fuel my day, you know. So that's why I've got that set up there. Next up is carbs. For the way that I've done carbs is I've actually done it in a curious way. I've set it up to figure out how many of the grams that I'm eating are from carbs. So here I've got 0 grams of carbs. So let's change that. Let's say I eat, hang on a minute, have I filled in? Banana. Oh wow, I'm smart. I set it up as a unit and then I filled these in as though it's as though it's a per gram. There we go, that should be fixed now. Yeah, so 42% of the grams of the macros that I've eaten are carbs. And, you know, I try to aim for around about 50%. And that's, you know, it's fine. Delving deeper into the carbs though, and again, this isn't something that I adhere to. It's not something that I'm like, oh, I need to hit 50%. The only things that I need to hit are getting adequate fiber, getting adequate protein, and then getting the minimum fat. But the fat is so easy to hit. I'm already at like 1/3, and that's from eating 3 eggs. Done. Fiber. There are 2 types of fiber. There's insoluble fiber and there's soluble fiber. Soluble fiber will get digested, insoluble will not. Personally, I've never really had problems with my digestive tract, so with fiber in my digestive tract, so I've never really had to kind of delve into the differences and where each is found. But if you do have problems, look into the differences and figure out which types of food you need to be eating for both. But for me, just a very generic 30 grams a day has worked completely fine for me. You'll find your own number. Some people it goes up to like 60, others can get away with like a ridiculously low amount. I do need 30, so that's what I have there. I think 20 is it's cutting it, so I like to give myself 30 to kind of aim for a better goal, to be sure. So that's why I have that. And lastly, we've got sugar. This is a curiosity of mine. You really don't have to, and it's really, I'd say that don't bother with the sugar. It'll just be confusing, because you're looking at this and you're thinking 53% of my carbs are from sugar. Well, yes, it's banana. So this is purely from the carbs, so sugar divided by carbs. So on a day where, let's say I eat some fruit, some veggies, and there's some natural sugars in there, you know, while yes, it is sugar, the food it came from is full of micronutrients. It's going to provide me with a lot of healthy building blocks for my body. Whereas if I had eaten jam and table sugar and honey and syrup, well, there are no micronutrients in that, or at least a titchy tiny amount. You could argue that honey's got like antioxidants and stuff, but come on, man, don't do that. So I don't really care what my sugar is. It's just nice to see what the split is, and especially on a day where I do have, like, let's say for example I have porridge with PB2 and jam. You know, that's a kind of sugar where I want to be like, okay, how much of this is actually affecting it? So don't worry about how many of your total macros, or total carbs I should say, are coming from sugars, because there will be a whole bunch if you're eating fruit. That's just how it is. Obviously, if your diet consists of cakes, chocolates, biscuits, things like this, then yes, that's problematic, and you'll probably notice that, hey, like 90% of my carbs are from sugars. That's something to worry about. But something tiny, like fruit, don't sweat it. So you can leave out the sugars, just be sensible with your diet. That's the reason I've got all of that. So what happens is throughout the day, I eat things, it accumulates here. What I've done is I've got it including these cells, so that when I expand my list, I just select the cells above, move it down, and then it counts that as well, so I don't need to like re-drag each of the columns, and that would just be a pain. What I've also done is I've moved the decimal point, so see here, it's just nicer on the eyes, and the only thing I'm using this for is the next thing, which is up here. It's tracking my calories for kind of good. So I've got the average overall, then I've got the last 7 days, and it's exactly how you'd expect. It's a sum, and then what I'm using here is the count all command. So if I were to just do all of it and then divide by, well, I'd have to update that formula every single day, because every single day there's another day being added, but it's not accounted for in the formula. So the count all does, if there is a cell with data in it, count that cell as it, well, it's more like count the number of cells with data in it, I should say. That's a more accurate way of saying it. So if I put A here, watch this average go down. There you go. Because now it's counting those cells. Just, if there's anything in there, it'll count that in the formula. So that's how I can make that work and never have to update it, which is brilliant. Then I've got my goals written there, just to keep in mind. Last 7 days. This one I do move. So what I'll do is I'll move this one down, like, whoops. Wow. That's weird. Right, whatever, we'll just move it down manually. Yeah, so we move it down, now it includes this. And then I just do this, swipe it across. There's probably a better way to do this, but it reverts to normal stuff, and then the percentages. So obviously once I fill this in after today, it'll make more sense. But that's all I do. Now, how do I find these numbers? It's a good question, because, you know, how do I discern what's the correct amount. What I'll generally do is for food like bananas, apples, things that are grown, things that come from the wild, that are not processed, if you will. And I say processed in quotes because things like cheese are technically processed. I mean, technically all food is kind of processed, but what I mean is going through a kind of production thing where the actual essence of the food is changed. So what's in it? So for example, apples are processed in that, you've got pesticides on them, then they're cleaned, then they're, that's technically a process. It's not literally just being picked off the tree and being put in the store, done. I digress from that. If it is just the food, like taken from the animal or whatever, I will find the data on the internet and I'll use reputable sources. So for example, the USDA, as much silliness they get up to, they're a good source for food and what's in food. So let's ignore some of their politics and let's just focus on the food part. If the USDA says that, an egg has got whatever many calories per 100 grams, that's probably right. If you go on like abcfatloss.com and it's like, and it says a random number, probably don't trust that. So that's how I do food. You can also use common sense. If you look at different sources, and if three of them say something similar, not the same, because what they can do is copy each other. So if they say something similar but not exactly the same, it's probably in that ballpark. For food that is specifically, for lentil soup. So Heinz lentil soup, that's processed. It's got a whole bunch of ingredients. They've put some stuff in it. I have no choice but to trust what it says on the label. So I'll trust that and just hope it's not lying. I try not to eat many of that kind of food, so it doesn't really become a problem for me. Same with things like conserves, cereals, like there. Look at what it says on the label of the thing that you're eating. What would not make sense, for example, if you go mango chutney, is you just Google mango chutney calories per 100 grams. Well, what if my mango chutney has got a whole bunch of added sugar in, and that one doesn't? So think about who the food is coming from and whether that is actually accurate to what you're putting in. Something quite tricky actually is figuring out calories of foods that are like instant. So for example, potatoes, or the PB2, where you have to add something to make it, and they've written down the calories in per portion in a kind of way. So like the PB2 is like each portion is 60 calories, and then it's like, yeah, but what's a portion? 1 tablespoon. Do you mean a tablespoon of the powder, or the powder with the water added according to the recipe? I feel it's with the recipe, so I had to spend like 20 minutes trying to figure out, by looking online and seeing different ideas to do with that, to figure out what the right way to track it was. And in the end I went with tracking the PB2 as a once it's prepared kind of thing, and I just kind of go with that and hope it doesn't go off by too much. So let's say I prepare 50 grams, but it's an exceedingly dry mix that I've made. Well, then I'll probably write it down as 55. And if it's exceedingly wet, I'll probably write it down as 45 to account for the water that's there or not there. The instant potato, however, that one was pretty easy to figure out, because they just had, it was like a literally just add water kind of thing. So I was able to kind of reverse engineer that based on the recipe they gave, and they said, because it says as prepared. So reverse engineer that, take out the water, figure out how much the dry is. A little bit of effort, but like that you can always be 100% correct, because let's say for example I put in 60 grams and then put in 190 grams of water. Well, if I were to report that as 250 grams as prepared, it's not exactly what the ingredients say. Likewise with if I went and put in 200, maybe 170, it's like, well, that's going to be different. So if possible, get it to the most dehydrated state possible and figure out what that is. lastly, if there's something that's truly rare that I eat, so let's say I go out and I have a piece of cake, you know, or a scone, I have got a daily extra. So I'll just put one here, and then let's say I figure it out to be 200 calories, you know, 30 grams of protein. It won't be, because it'll be something naughty. So let's say 1 gram of protein, then 40 carbs. No, that's fat. So let's say 5 fat, 40 carbs, 2 fiber, and then, you know, like 33 sugar. And I just have one here, so that's just caught up there. Except for something that I really don't have often, it doesn't make sense for me to put in a permanent thing. I mean, I'm thinking about getting rid of chocolate, which is somewhere here, so I really don't have that often. Either way, that's how and why I do pretty much everything to do with my tracking, and that is pretty much all you need to know. And then of course, yeah, last thing is the fiber and protein per calorie of the day that I've had, just to see how that's doing. Yeah, to summarize, as a conclusion, be extremely accurate in what you're eating and how you're marking it down, and be consistent. Don't lie. I mean, that should go without saying. Don't lie, because you're going to use this to figure out how many calories you need to be eating. If you're lying to yourself, this is useless. So separate your emotions and your heart from what the numbers say. Same like with the scales. It's like, oh, I feel fat today, I don't want to. No, it's just a number. Like, see it as that. Use it as a tool. And then know what you need to eat for each macro category, and then put that in and just see how it goes. So for example, if I'm eating if I'm eating a lot of sugar, if I'm eating a lot of carbs, and I shouldn't be, and I'm missing out on my protein macros, then hey, maybe I should not eat that much. You know, if I'm having jam, maybe I'll cut the jam out and have some tuna instead. I know that's horrible, but this is pretty much everything you need to know about tracking your own calories. So, good luck.